Good morning. First things first, can you hear me? I want to make sure the technology's working well. Can you hear me? Someone say yeah, just so I know. And I'm delighted to see you back here. I've been gone for 2 weeks and I wondered if everybody had moved on, which would have been okay. But I'm delighted to see that there's anybody here. Um, well, I guess I'm going to assume that you can hear me. And welcome. It's nice to see you all, even though I can't. Um, Big news since I saw you last, or big event was sounds good. All right, Kyle, nice to see you. Yeah, I was flown all expenses paid to Vienna for a week for this invite only conference of philosophers and biophilosophers, that is, people who are trying to figure out what we are based on nature alone, um, and philosophers of science who are trying to figure out how science is done. You had some theoretical biologists there. These are people who do, computational biology. You had all sorts, and I had a wonderful time. um, I was a bit of an outlier. Most of them, all of them, were either in academics full tilt, like tenured professors of this or that, or were striving for that kind of a role as postdocs, graduate students, etc. But all of them in the academic game, and I'm in it and I'm not. Uh, in that I'm more informal and more interested, you could say, in public education around these topics, making it accessible, than I am in the academic approaches. So I had really interesting conversations. Um, People took me seriously. They also thought I was a bit of a character, some of them. Um, Rev Walt, good to have you back here. So I was kind of an interloper and kind of central also because why was I invited to this thing? In part because of my ideas, but largely because I went with my research colleague, Terence Deacon, who is a luminary in this crowd. And the relationship between me and him must be a little peculiar to these guys. I'm sort of like, I mean, he's got lots of status with these people. As a Harvard, Berkeley neuroscientist, biological anthropologist who's written important books that they all cite. Um, and yet he hangs out with me, and I'm more informal than him. And yet they can tell that I'm as much involved in the substance as he is. That is, I represent his substance well, but I'm just much more informal or relaxed than they tend to be in their work. That even became something of a topic among us. That is, I have a feeling that there are ways in which the academic pursuit of an understanding of what we actually are um, is tends towards distractions that aren't actually going to get us there. And not only that, Terry feels the same way. And in a way, he was presenting on this challenge that there's something about the way in which academics abstract all ideas from the physical work involved and then manipulate the ideas up here in the abstract that keeps it from maintaining a consistent grounding by which you could figure out what the actual fuck we are. That's my sense of it. And to a large extent, it's Terry's too. It was interesting to see how people would, um, who have spent their lives pursuing an understanding of what we are based exclusively in nature, how they didn't really want to get into the physical. They didn't, or they wanted to, they treated, an empirical test like enough to ground something in physics. After all, if you tack weld your theory onto something that happens in the real world, that validates your theory according to kind of the empirical approach. We're saying something different. We're saying, no, you really have to explain what life is within nothing but physical chemistry. And that's a different approach than a lot of the academics are taking. So it was interesting. The whole thing was fun. Okay, but enough about that. Does anybody have anything they want to talk about? If not, I'll end up talking. Knowing me, if you don't constrain me, I'll end up talking about what I want to talk about. I'm not sure if that's a good idea. Anybody got anything? Nice to have you here. Anything on your mind? What have you been thinking about in my absence? Surely something, um, something vivid, something that you notice, something about people. Certainly been a lot of that for me lately, thinking about people. I'm here just to hear you. All right, Kyle. All right, all right. Um, we may end up having to talk about that. Unfortunately, I didn't come prepared. You're busy at work. Rev Walt, what is wrong with you? I mean, you didn't. Are you telling me you didn't do your homework or that your dog ate it? Anyway, I'll just keep on talking for a minute. I'll just keep on talking. Um, and if anything comes up, please run it by me because I hate to wear out my welcome. That's something that's been on my mind this morning. Um, just in passing, lots of things on my mind these days, but this one's interesting to me. So you're talking to someone and you don't want to wear out your welcome, but you also want some affinity with them. Uh, this has come up for me in the last couple of days. I had the most amazing exchange. An important peer slash mentor in my 1980s, a guy who seemed to have drifted from interest in me. And it wasn't that hard to accept that I was no longer interesting to him. He surfaced again. I haven't seen him in years. I could tell that we were on the same page about not being on the same page. He had gone in one direction, I had gone in another direction. And so, but out of the blue, he shows up and suddenly wants to have lots of conversation. And not only that, the divergence between us at that point seemed to become more accentuated. He really went this way. I really went that way. And yet he was an important influence, an early inspiration for me. Um, and so I'm trying to reconnect with him. And to do that, I'm trying to bring up what I'm into these days, and also to celebrate the contrast that we ended up taking different paths in life. Um, but I also get the sense that it's uncomfortable for him to hear about what's up for me or what's interesting, and it can even feel competitive. So there's this interesting question about what do you do when you're kind of fishing for a connection with someone. You want to fish a little bit. You don't want to tug too hard. They don't owe you attention to what's interesting to you. You're just looking for whether there's potential for compatibility. Um, uh, you do a bit of what I call weavedance, which is evidence of weaving. That is, you bring in things that they've said to you and you do something with them. It's a way of showing that the conversation is not just you throwing pre-recordings at each other. So, in my exchanges with this guy over the last few days, I've been bringing up lots of things that I remember him saying that I have found useful in my life. I'm trying to make that connection. At the same time, I feel a wariness, like he really doesn't want to go to various places that are of interest to me, and I don't want to push it. I don't need to. I'm into connecting where the connecting's good. So, yeah, all of that's interesting to me, and the divergence. I mean, one of the things about getting to be older is you get to have lived other lives vicariously. I love catching up with someone from my distant past, um, more than they tend to like it with me. I often get the feeling that they think, "Wow, this guy doesn't have enough going on in his life, that he should bother to get back in touch with me." There's that version of it. But for me, it's like I get to live these lives vicariously. I mean, you get this really longitudinal sense of someone. You knew them back then. Now you know them. Now you get to see how their trajectories went, what kinds of major influences shifted them this way or that. Those are fascinating. Um, oh, like the hero I have to hear regularly around here. Um, okay, so Rev Walt, I'm not sure if you're talking about my hero bot recordings. Have you been catching those things? Boy, am I prolific. And it turns out it's like a hidden talent. I really play a dumbass well. And I mean, I'm really impressed with my skills at it. These are one take videos, the Magnificent Mike videos. One take, and I look at them afterwards and I say, yeah, you're pretty good at playing a dumbass. I think I'm still trying to figure out what I'm doing with those videos because I don't think it's pure satire. And And yet, I don't know that I can pinpoint what makes it not pure satire. One possibility is that the method acting for me of being a dumbass comes easy. And that's because I really wouldn't put any of those attitudes past me. I'm not just sneering at that behavior in other people. I can see it in myself. I can remember when I had that behavior. And but at the same time, it's clearly parody. It's clearly satire. I'm clearly taking the piss or the Mickey of those guys. That's I'm making fun of them. The videos are interesting because it's an attempt to explain, at least to yourself, what is going on. That's exactly what they are. So I need to explain what's going on with those videos. Well, I don't need to. Nobody needs to know. But this is what I think it is that I spent like 25 years trying to really work out what's going on in the generic absolutist's mind and heart. What's really going on in there? Not what they say, nothing to do with lifestyle brand, what that's like. And then I wrote it up very explicitly. And this is that kind of academic leaning of mine, is to actually say this is what's going on. And I did a lot of that in my book, but in my book, What's Up with Assholes. All this is me acting out those things and revealing it as the way that they would if they could tolerate knowing what their real MO is and celebrating it as such. They're employing, in real life, they employ their cover story, which is that they're actually really out to make America great or whatever, or that the Patriots, whatever it is. But I'm trying to lay out what's going on, what's really driving them. From my perspective, these are my research analytic guesses that's what's going on for them. And to actually say it as if they could say it, as if they were actually selling the techniques that they're actually thriving on. It's fun. I like it. Okay. Sadly, you are nearly deja vu, Mega Mike. That's um, that's true. I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that, William, but I think there is something to it. You know, I say I've wasted my whole life learning things I now already know, and I do believe in universal empathy and compassion, by which I mean I want to be able to put myself in anybody's shoes and remember when they were mine. So really, I could do that anytime. I could take any of the MAGA moves that I'm describing and give you chapter and verse detail on times in my life when I've done exactly that. It's not like in the abstract, nothing human is foreign to me, or that other boilerplate thing that drives me crazy, which is I never said I was perfect. It's not that. I can actually lay out there is every move humans have made. I have made it, and I probably will make it again. So it's not like, oh yeah, I used to do that back when I was stupid. But yes, I am the MAGA guru. I am delivering what I've long suspected is really what Donald Trump is delivering. So um, I'll just lay that out. So what happens when you join a cult? Well, there's a lifestyle brand, and I think of that as like the brand printed on the back of a deck of generic playing cards. So imagine that you join a group. You think you're joining for the cause, and maybe you are, but that's not why you're going to stick around. You're going to stick around for the ability to strut. But when you join, they give you a pack of wild card trump cards, and on the back of each card is the brand that you get. So these would, if you joined MAGA, you get their deck of wild card trump cards. And on the back of it, it says MAGA, which means that it's like exclusively MAGA. Only MAGA could use these tricks. That's the amazing thing about these guys, is they act like the things they're saying are unique or exclusive to MAGA. That is not the case. And in fact, this week I had to point out to my hippie punk and what was the other one? A spiritual friends, that we just didn't realize that there was nothing unique to our claims. There's nothing about punks daring, defiance that was unique to a liberal or progressive message. Obviously not. but not so obviously that we didn't recognize that actually Trump was Sid Vicious. He just Sid Vicious to a different lifestyle brand or a different ideology. Anyway, so you're issued this deck of wildcard trump cards, and I actually need your help with this. Years ago, I realized that there's got to be a game that you could make, a card game that would be these wildcard trump cards. And I've been trying to figure out what it would be. Um, it would be a game where no matter what someone said to you, you had a way of playing hero in response by putting down a card. I've got blank cards. I've worked out various versions of it. I'm assuming that well, it's been a while since I thought about this, but I'm going to try to revive it, especially because I'm about to go on Monday. I leave for Mexico and Guatemala, and I'm going down there with a buddy from our research group, just a buddy. This friend of mine, Louise King, who was an early fan of the psychoproctology book, and has been a part of the Sunday research group. And she was going to Mexico, and I have a place down there. We can stay in separate rooms, and we'll go down there. And she was very interested in this card game, so we'll probably end up working on it down there some. And that also means that maybe if I do a work a YouTube live next week from Guatemala or Mexico, we might be further along on it. Okay. Hey, limited light, sup? Nice to see you here. Okay. I'm not hearing enough. There is that MAGA style pigeon chess, right? So what I'm talking about is a game where, well, the way I've described it is that they give the impression of playing three-dimensional chess, but no, they're not playing three-dimensional chess. They're playing one-dimensional chess, and it's just the y-axis. It's just I'm up, you're down, and so anything you bring up that's on the ground is irrelevant. They're not playing standard two-dimensional chess. They're only playing up and down. And so how to turn that into a card game, any suggestions you've got, please send them my way. There's got to be a way to turn that into a card game. Where basically either two partners deflect each other's attacks. I'm not sure how it works, but anyway, all right. Yes, I'm your biggest commenter. Limited light. I hope you the ones who appropriately straightened me out this morning on the difference between ad hominem and straw man arguments. Very useful thing to say. Peter, I was in Vienna. I was in the countryside outside of Vienna at as a hotel out there for most of the week, but I did get 2 hours on last Friday before yesterday, in Vienna proper. Boy, that was fun. Oh man, so you actually live there. I'm so sorry. I should have. We would have had a grand old time. We would have connected up. Yeah, I'm sorry I missed you. It was hotter than hell out there last week. I was impressed by how muggy and hot it was. Next time, there could be a next time. I made good connections with the group that does this research, this philosophy of science, nature of agency research out there. And I should find the name of the town that I went to, the hotel I was at. I'm sure you'll have heard of at least the neighborhood. It was lovely. We had a sweet time. And I met all sorts of people who spoke with your accent. And my hearing is getting worse and worse. They're not talking about cochlear implants for me, for God's sake. And I suspect I now begin to think that my hearing. So the accents were hard for me, but I did what I could. I think that I did my hearing damage not through playing music, but from speed listening to books. It's an interesting trade-off. I mean, I have been speed listening to books for 20 or 30 years through headphones or earplugs. And since I'm speed listening and my hearing had already started to deteriorate, it's quite possible that I was turning it up loud enough to hear it at high speed and be able to interpret it. Um, and Yeah, so I've done myself some serious ear damage. Um, Lower Austria, I presume it was an hour outside of Vienna. This hotel, and I could look it up. I'll see if I can do that without losing the train of thought. Was there a train of thought here? Do we have a train of thought to play with? Um, no, I'm the one who tries to call out those premature that tries to call out those prematurely pointing out parody by acting as if you're really MAGA. Yes, limited light. This is part of the interesting response. I mean, people get livid with me. Now, here's something we could talk about, and we will talk about tomorrow morning. So, I have sometimes pitched to people, what would you say if you could have any opportunity to speak directly to a Trumpist? What would you say to call them out? In a way, I'm getting those responses when I post my magnificent Mike videos because people mistake me for really being MAGA, and they say what they would say to a MAGA person. These are often people who are surprised to get a MAGA video in their liberal feed. They end up with it in their liberal feed because the algorithm associates my past work with a kind of a liberal audience or an anti-Trump audience. And suddenly they're seeing Magnificent Mike. I think this is one of the reasons why I lose 3 or 4 subscribers a day. Um, is that they're just appalled or offended. But at the same time, I also end up getting in the comments section people who don't recognize that I'm doing something akin to a parody, which I attribute to my phenomenal Academy Award winning acting. I am the Meryl Streep of MAGA mics. But also, I end up getting to hear what people say to Trumpists. It's not very effective. It, Nothing I say to them is very effective either. But I don't want to take refuge in pious failure, and I don't want to claim that it's victory because it sounds good to me what I say to them. I'm trying to figure out what to say that could disturb people who have been issued that deck of wild card trump cards. You could say the master card of the deck is that anybody who is critical of me is clearly deranged and therefore not worth listening to. This is a kind of a um, what was it? It's a retro dismissal. So if I'm a Trumpist and I hear anything that's critical of me, the fact that it's critical is evidence that the person is insane and that therefore, or is the rival, and that there's nothing to learn from them, and therefore that I don't have to listen to them. Which is, when you think about it, I mean, that's your ultimate wild card trump card, and very tempting. We all have that temptation. Um, so how to deal with that has been, I guess, on my mind too. I'm still looking for better things to say to Trumpists. How do you engage with people there's no talking to? Um, Short of engaging in warfare with them, physical warfare, I'm still looking at verbal combat as a bulwark against physical violence. Very late in the game, but that's what I'm thinking about. Okay, reframing to be our best chance of reform. Uh, let's see. Yes, there we go. Yeah, Jeff, I want to say something about reframing. I think it's a really important thing. Yeah, no, I understand. Okay, so the Magna Basco, I don't know about that. Street epistemology, I know about, and I do think there's a way in which it doesn't. It's fabulous, but it doesn't work with Trumpists. Not and I think we need to appreciate the limitations and the benefits of such an approach. But anyway, I want to get back to this thing about reframing. Appears to be our best chance of reform. Here's a thought I had just as I was leaving for Vienna. Um, the person who, in a collaborative conversation, the kind you might be able to get going with street epistemology, the idea is that you are both listening to each other and one way that you're listening to each other is that you follow what they say with something related to what they said, and vice versa. That's the give and take. But once it becomes strictly a power struggle, then the winner is the person who reframes most consistently, reliably, and successfully. It doesn't matter what you reframe to. It's only about the power to reframe. If you can get the other person talking about your topic, you win. That's all there is to it. And so you have to do that. How do you reframe successfully if you're actually in a fight with someone where it's only about power and it's the power to control the conversation? That's all that's real. Everything else, all the content is irrelevant. They're not paying attention to that. They just want to win by leading you around by the nose or grabbing you by the ponytail and leading you wherever. If they can do that, they have won. It's a power struggle at that point. It's who can out trumpire who. Trumpire meaning you're trumping by playing umpire. Saying, no, we're not talking about that. We're talking about that. That's out of bounds. That's it. Okay. So aim for the lowest common denominator is part of it. So you have to, first of all, you have to change topics with confidence. And you have to be oblivious to their topic. And you have to come up with a topic that they somehow feel compelled to talk about. So that's why putting them on the defensive is most effective. If you can successfully accuse someone of something, then they'll feel compelled to defend themselves. And this has always been the Achilles heel of liberals. So or the anti-Trumpists. Just compare these two. Okay, you got this guy who comes out there. He's been issued his deck of wild card Trump cards by Trump, and it's got the brand name on the back that says it's MAGA, and only MAGA has this power. This power comes from the lifestyle brand. It's not a generic power. Okay, so this person's out there, and they have decided they got all these reasons. These can be really shy people, but now they're not shy at all because they have a way to play a card that claims that victory no matter what happens. As you've heard me say, the shy people can now go out and act like exhibitionists. They'll sidle up as if for a conversation, and then when they got you engaged, they fuck with you, they expose themselves and shock you, and no matter how you respond, they have a card to play that says that they won. In the meantime, you've got these liberals, folks like me. We got ambitiously conscientious, a luxury of circumstances. Life seemed safe enough to us that we started accumulating moral claims, things that we could claim about our virtue, and we took them seriously. We wanted to be good people, and part of that was also that we wanted to be receptive and interested in other people and compassionate and empathetic. So this guy comes out and he starts a conversation about whatever, and he's just trying to do the frame dominance thing. That was the whole point here, reframing. So they're going to reframe, then they're going to reframe over and over, and they're talking to me, and I'm trying to be conscientious. I'm trying to listen to them. I'm trying to engage at the level of street epistemology with them, and they're just fucking with me. They don't care about any of that stuff, and they throw things at me. They throw doubts at me, and since I'm a liberal who's accumulated this whole vast repertoire of virtue claims about myself, I am likely to defend myself. Who's going to lose that battle? Who's going to lose that battle? Me, right? Okay, so I'm trying to get beyond that. I'm trying to get us to get beyond that. Okay, so let's see. But they are grabbing me by the long blonde hair and throwing me into the fantasy land. Yes, it's fantasy land to you, but they talk about it in earnest, and you saying that it's fantasy land doesn't work on them. So one of the things we talk about in the study group, and if you're not part of it, come join us tomorrow. We meet at 9 o'clock to 10:30 California time tomorrow, and come join us. It's free. All you do is email me at jshare6 at g. I'll put it here, and I'll put you on the list. You don't have to show up. You don't have to speak. But this is a group that's working on how do you engage with people there's no talking to? Okay. All right. Shirley's part of it. Let's see. Yes. when they change my topic, yes, okay. I don't think that's enough. Limited light. I think that's limited light. I think we need to do better. And so I'm asking you, this would be a great place for us to explore this. So you call them boring, and they could say, they pull any of their cards and say, you're boring or whatever. I want to know, is there anything you can think of saying to them where they would be compelled to talk about the topic you've brought up? I'm talking about, what if you're dealing in a situation, and I don't think this is unrealistic. I think there are situations where someone's only goal is, as Jeff described it, reframing most and best. There's he who reframes most successfully, he who controls the conversation, jerking it around. You have to demonstrate that you're controlling the conversation by actually changing the conversation over and over. Um, what would you say? Here are two examples of things you'd say. One is you'd bring up something wholly unrelated that you know they love talking about. That's one thing. And another is to bring up something that they have to defend themselves about. A lot of what they do is projection. It's projection, but they do it first. The person who projects first has all sorts of advantages, power advantages. So if they are able to accuse you of exactly what they're doing, you're going to be very compelled to talk about it, and they win. These are really interesting questions to me. I hope they are to you too, because our survival depends on doing better than we have at them. I'm not doing much better than saying, than calling them boring. I do that sometimes. I also call them on jerking off, because that's what I think they're doing. But there's a way in which to do it that they can easily deflect, and I keep on looking for ways to do it that they can't deflect. One thing that's been interesting now that I'm MAGA Mike is that I get to respond to a troll's accusation in the role of Magnificent Mike. That's been fun, and it seems useful to me. So, for example, a guy writes to me and says, um, "You liberals are all the same. You generalize about us Republicans." And I said, "Damn straight," and then went on and took his argument and rolled it out as if I was Magnificent Mike. Um, uh, that's not the best example of it, but it's an advantage I've got now that I play that role. So when someone realizes that I'm making fun of them, I switch back into the role that I'm playing. And it might confuse them. Epstein seems the hottest topic for MAGA at the moment. A hook? Well, this one is interesting. Um, any suggestions, anybody? Because I'm not the authority on this stuff. I'm just someone who's exploring with you guys. But the Epstein thing is, I've been watching the podcasts about it. For example, Pod Save America, and it relates to this question of whether any of the drama they stir within themselves is actually likely to lead anywhere. Remember, they've all got these wild card trump cards. They got ways to pretend they're the hero. They can do the righteous indignation. They can also do oh, that's all fake news. They can play all of those cards, and they can do it at us, but they can also do it at themselves. The way Bondino and Pam Bondi are doing these days. Whatever his name is, the FBI director, who's outraged that there's no releasing of the FBI files and missed a day of work. The other day, he needed a, what do you call, personal day, head of the FBI. But so what happens? Do they eat themselves alive? Dan Bon Jovi, there we go. Do they eat themselves alive? We can only hope. I did have to come up with the term hope bait these days for the amount of videos and memes we get that are giving us just like a thimble full of hope that something will undermine this. It is a way to get hits, this hope bait. that things are finally starting to turn around. Um, and an example of that would be, oh, look, they're finally blowing themselves up over the Epstein file. I don't think so. They are in love. Thank you, Rev Walt. That's exactly right. They are in love. And I bet that Don Bon Jovi will buckle down and change. One of the main things they've got going for themselves is this fluidity. They don't have to talk about anything they don't want to talk about. They talk about what they want to talk about. They can change the topic every minute. They can change their minds every minute. They used to call that wishy-washy back in the 2000s, during elections. Um, it's their best asset, and they have turned being wishy-washy into a status symbol. Um, uh, yes, there's a loyalty test. So yeah, Kyle, there will be people who get bumped out of the cult, but so this is what we're trying to figure out about them. Um, uh, on Pod Save America yesterday, they're talking about how these few who actually have some principles. They actually believe the principles that they're using as excuses. The principles that for me are all just wild card trump cards that they play, but they don't actually care about them at all. So they're speculating that there might be some who really are willing to die for the cause. Elon Musk, for example. So we got two of those on the table right now. We got Elon Musk saying this budget deficit increase is exactly against the principles we were fighting for. Do I believe him about that? I don't believe. I don't know. I doubt it. And then you've got people like Don Bon Jovi or Tucker Carlson who are saying, it's an outrage that these things weren't released. I think Carlson's on that side of that. He was, um, or on uh, the bombing of Iran. So are they just stirring drama to keep the distraction alive? Um, Almost like playing parts in a drama. Do they mean this stuff? What what sword will they? What hill will they die on? I think the only one. My assumption is the only one they would die on is any kind of loss of career status. Um, that is, they would do anything to avoid that. I don't know. I don't know. But is there a hook on? As Shirley asked, is there a hook on Epstein? Again, it depends on who you're talking to. Um, Here, I tried this out the other day on my Zionist pro-Trump uh, man crush on Elon Musk buddy. Grok 4 came out and for a few days was putting out anti-Semitic stuff. Well, this guy is virulently anti-Semitic. So I asked him, um, are you at all concerned about that? I mean, your man crush Elon Musk puts out this anti-woke thing, and the first thing you get is Mecha Hitler or whatever he called himself. And no, he has no cognitive dissonance about that. He's a master of not having cognitive dissonance. He says they fix that in a day, and Grok 4 is amazing, but they fix that in a day, so he wasn't worried about it. Grok 4 is amazing, apparently. I haven't played with it yet. Okay. So if suppose you had a friend, Shirley, who was really into proper behavior, really had a visceral reaction to pedophilia, and was also really pro MAGA. Well, maybe there'd be a hook with someone like that if they really had that visceral response. Remember, Shirley, that for me, I see no alternative but calling them out on their MO. I don't see content as a credible way to get past their deflections and into their heart. I don't see content that way. I don't see morality that way. I don't think I can win them over on moral arguments. The closest I seem to be able to come up with is you're playing you got issued a generic deck of cards that makes you feel like a hero no matter what. You'll say or do anything to avoid human humility. You will do anything to pretend you're right always. You are a wimp. Um, or you've gotten totally addicted to playing hero and can't see straight anymore. Something like that. Does that work? No, nothing works. But that doesn't mean I can give up on trying to figure out what will work. And yeah, if you've got a friend who's really viscerally appalled by the thought of anybody doing anything, I mean, someone who, for example, sexual kinkiness is terrifying anyway, then and is also a MAGA supporter. Yeah, there might be a real hook there, um, where you just call her on her own inconsistency. Commiserate on the topic, insecurity, or whatever the underlying issue is. The underlying issue is tends to work. You don't have to swallow the hook or accept their predictable conclusion. Commiserate on that insecurity, or whatever the underlying issue is. Uh, Help me with that one, if you will, Dharma Bruce. I want to understand what you mean. I have a sense what you're saying. Um, you know, let me see if this is what you're talking about, Dharma Bruce. Um, if they say, "Yeah, the egg prices are getting too high," this is a trivial example. You'd say, "Yeah, don't I know it? I mean, I'm really struggling with that too." Or something like that. Regarding Epstein, injustice is terrible. His crimes are terrible. We agree there. Okay. So what you're saying is, yeah, you bond over common values. Here's one way I've used that. I'm just riffing off what you're saying. I'm not saying here's the right way to use it or anything like that. I'm just saying, yeah, that's interesting. So a troll got in touch with me and says, yeah, you Democrats, you are the pedophile party. And I say, I'm really glad to hear from you. We both agree that pedophilia is a major sin or crime. Um, you sound like someone who's given a lot of thought to uh, uh, how to distinguish the pedophiles. I mean, you speak with great authority on this. Um, I know some people who think that the Republicans have also engaged in a fair degree of pedophilia. Given your powers of discernment, what would you say? What can I say to these people who say that about the Republicans? It's a technique. Does it work? No. In general, anytime I go say anything that long or even shorter, um, they disappear. Um, okay. So they seek confidence. Compartmentalization may be necessary means to overcome the dissonance. Yeah, compartmentalization. So you're saying that they do a kind of compartmentalization, and I think that's true. Um, I know powers of discernment. So you see what I'm doing, Rev. I'm not getting into my own. Um, I'm not getting tripped up on my own standards. I don't want to impress myself with my standards about power of discernment. I want to fuck with them. That's what I'm trying to do. And I don't want to fuck with them for my glory. I want to fuck with them by actually playing into where their minds are. And that includes quite a bit of the kind of compassion stuff I just played out, where I honor them as a trick. It also includes uh, calling him faggy for their man crush on the man who does his own trust fund baby who does his own makeup. I don't care how I do it, and I don't care about. I don't have to worry about maintaining my own standards about powers of discernment. Um, I know what my powers of discernment, my standards are for them. I know theirs are different, and I'm trying to figure out. I'm trying to use my powers of discernment to figure out how to revive their powers of discernment, and part of that would come from the Pygmalion effect, that is, treating them as though they've got powers of discernment. And part of it would be through relentless ridicule of their lack of powers of discernment. how to do it is just I'm glad we're thinking about it together because I don't know. We're trying to figure this out. It is projection. Act like a hero, then run and hide. It is a narrow view, the cult of their fears. That's right. And then so Doug, nice to see you by the way. I hope we connect tomorrow. We've been trying to connect in the last few meetings, Sunday morning meetings. Please come. We'd love to have you. I mean, you add valuable stuff. We're grateful. Um, yeah, that's a fair diagnosis of what's going on with them. And then the question is, what do you say to them? Or how do you connect with them? And we've gotten good ideas from you on this before. It's basically you gave me a picture of how to do this, where you say something, you plant a seed that only acts on them after they've walked away. It's a seed that they are tempted enough to ingest, and then it kind of explodes inside of them. It's like exploding cigar stuff, and not for the satisfaction of seeing them blown up, but for the satisfaction of of making a little dent in their narrow view. That is weakening their armor. How do you do that? How do you convey that this is projection? How do you get them thinking about that stuff? Um, let's see. I was thinking, okay, yeah, yeah. Those are the questions. That's what I'm wondering about a lot of the time, and I'm grateful for every chance I get to try things out because maybe something effective. Nothing we've done has been effective, I wouldn't say, or else we wouldn't be in this situation. But it maybe this something effective would be a thousand solution, in which case I need 1,000 at bats to even begin to find it. So anyway, let's keep thinking about that. Powers of discernment. Let's see, compartmentalization. Yes, compartmentalization is a big part of it. Mostly today, but it's serious and it's light. I limited light. I'm right with you on that. Um dironic, dire irony. That's what I think of. This is very serious stuff, and yet I won't get furrow browed about it. I think we need to be. I think of it as serious play. It's the constraints, the standards I'm trying to meet are really serious. And we got to play around within those standards. The standards are how do you humbly humble someone who will say or do anything to avoid human humility? And since that's so hard, we have to be creative. Um, uh, oh, see, no, there's a thing limited light. When you listen to me, I drain the battery. I drain the battery so fast, man. You got to be on a charger to stick to hang with me at all. You have to be on a charger. I am all the time. I have 220 volts right up my butt. No, it's just one cup of coffee. That's all. All right, let's see. Um, compartmentalization has it comes back to what we talked about in Vienna. Um, I don't know if I'll be able to make this leap. Um, last night I was reading something in philosophy of science about um, I don't know if I can make this leap. The difference between the Greek and the Babylonian approach to epistemology. The Greeks were you start with a few fundamental principles and you build everything off of them. That's like Euclid. And the Babylonian, if I can capture this right, is you've got a bunch of separate ideas that reinforce each other. And I think there's a lot to this. For example, that's mostly how language works. That is, it's all mutually defining. What we end up learning when we learn language is basically a thesaurus of connections between things. Um, so it's all suspended, and the ideas are all related to each other. And that's how you get a kind of coherence that prevents compartmentalization. That is, you've got a whole worldview of ideas that are mutually defining. And still, there's a problem with that. Um, that's been on my mind lately. Yeah, it's sorry, it's where I go to read and lose my hearing. This last week, I sped read a wonderful introduction to uh, Erasmus's book In Praise of Folly. So I am trying to understand human appetites, human nature, and where I go for it is I go to the earliest expressions of it. I want to really understand what goes on with humans, what our appetites are. Going back to the origins is great. And really, you got like 2,000 years of human history where basically it's all folks asking, okay, what are the rules for being granted eternal life? And that's where Erasmus plays in. Um, Now, these guys, they call this so he's attacking, he's satiring. So he's writing in the 1500s. He's attacking and satiring what they called Aristotelian scholasticism, which is all of these people, these scholars, religious scholars, because all there was back then, who are coming up with a coherent story. So all of the logic is coherent and everything is tied to everything else and nothing is compartmentalized, except that the whole damn thing is compartmentalized separate from reality. So this is the thing, is that this is very much like the Trumpists. That is, they have a coherent story, they have powers of discernment, but they're completely out of touch with reality. They do have powers of discernment, the basic power of discernment. They have incredibly tight integrity. I'm talking about the Trumpists here. And you'll see what I'm doing. I'm not apologizing for them. They are entirely consistent on two things. One is that they are entirely consistent. You can never get them to admit that they are not consistent. So there can be a hypocrite about anything else, but if you accuse them of hypocrisy, they'll reject it. They're playing God, and God is one. God does not contradict himself, and so they don't contradict themselves either any more than God does. God does a lot, but he denies that he does, and anybody who supports him denies he does. So Trump he's terribly inconsistent, but he's consistent in claiming he's consistent, and his supporters are as well. Very much like God. Okay. And then the other thing that they're completely subtle and nuanced about is if anyone's at fault, it's anyone but them. So the fine-tuned accusations, their projections can be so nuanced. But all it amounts to is me good, you bad. That's kind of all there is. So uh, so we're talking about this problem where you've got coherence, you got this is too much, but the kind of suspended thing that the Babylonian method was about, which is you remember various things. You don't start from a few principles and build everything out the way the Greeks do. You've got a suspended collection of mutually defining things, very much like how language works. That's great, except that it's got no correspondence it doesn't have to have any correspondence with reality. To give you a simple example, I could declare a completely consistent formal theory that explains all reality. Everything in reality is made of green cheese. It's a perfectly consistent theory. It's just got no correspondence to reality. So how you get that correspondence is a really interesting question for me. And yeah. Um, and how you deal with this appetite for a different kind of compartmentalization. There's compartmentalization that goes on where you say one thing and then you say another one out. You're keeping your minds. It's a way of avoiding cognitive dissonance. Is you speak out, you talk out both sides of your mouth, and you feel consistent no matter what. And then there's the other one, which is that you detach from reality completely. I'm off on a tangent that probably needs some more thinking through. I'm working on it. Anybody got anything here do you want to talk about? How's your love life? How's your what is most where are you getting your self joy these days? Um, yeah, just to completely change the subject, and don't have to get personal about it. But here's what I notice is that Yeah, this is me switching the subject for no reason, but me switching to the topic of um, our need for reasons to feel hopeful, feel confident, to like ourselves, and the varieties of ways in which we do this. Harking back to something that my ex-wife taught me indirectly as we were breaking up. This was 35 years ago. And I mentioned it in a video. There you go. The creative writing class. Great place to go. Great place to go for this. Um, uh, she said, I don't, what she taught me indirectly through three things she said was that she didn't fall in love for how the other person felt. She fell in love for how she feels about herself in the presence of that other person. And I think that's a really powerful insight. Uh, I don't think Trumpists fall in love with Donald Trump. I don't think they fall in love with making America great again. I think they fall in love with how they feel about themselves, believing that stuff or claiming to believe that stuff. They are ornamenting themselves with something that brings them self joy. And from what I can tell from my personal life, we all need that. Whether we can admit it or not is a different thing. Um, yeah, I'm gonna just I'll talk personally about this for a minute. Um, uh, I'm getting older. I've gotten I gained like 4 or 5 pounds I never had to worry about before. So whatever I felt before about, I got some joy from a sense that I was good looking enough. And so that vanity is being challenged these days. Um, and and often I'll maintain a source of joy longer than I should. This would be a standard thing for humans. That is, if you get addicted to feeling like you've got a certain asset and then you lose that asset, you're probably the last to know it. So there's that. In the meantime, on top of that, all of this work I'm doing in the world, talking about big ideas and social change. Let's talk about the social change side of it. Total fucking disaster. I spent my entire life working for things that are now being routed daily, gutted daily. All this house of cards that we who believed in the American dream and what America could be, what we've been building, that house of cards, they just if you're midlife and you've spent any of your life identifying, feeling good about yourself for caring about that stuff, and you're going through a midlife crisis by definition are where you realize that you're not on schedule for all the ambitious things you want to do. So if you're going through a midlife crisis during the complete dismantling of our system, the system we had faith in for so long and hopes for so long, that makes for a really hard midlife crisis. So I get some of that. Um, I also get some of the joy or comfort in myself from audience, from people who are interested in my work. Um, uh, like those of you who are here, you are you are fuel for me. You keep me going, and I also have to remember um, to not rely too heavily on that fuel because that fuel comes and goes. People lose interest in me. Like I say, I lose maybe 100 subscribers a month. I'm not gaining subscribers as much. Um, so the reason I'm bringing this stuff up is it's not just autobiographical. I'm inviting you to think about, to inventory the variety of things that you're relying on to feel joy. No, to feel self joy, or to at least get over the question of are you okay? Um, Ambassadors of hope for you. Yeah, you are. I'm afraid. Yeah, um, yeah, yeah. If I got on this call this morning and there was nobody here, I'd have to adjust to that. Um, and in general, as we grow older, we have to adjust to less and less. So I've got this one friend. He was a successful psychiatrist. So it's an MD psychiatrist who, by his own admission, is dealing with dementia these days. And he's used to a certain amount of audience. And one of the things he's doing is relying more and more on AI to communicate for him. I think we're going to see a lot more of that. People who keep their joy alive through the surrogate uh, self expression through AI, but also audience, ambassadors of hope that are AI. And I have no problem. Um, uh, I have I have no problem with people. Well, I probably do have a little bit of a problem with it. Relationships are ships passing in the sea is how an uncle of mine used to talk about. Uh, Boats passing in the sea. Good. Global, you're onto something that's also related to this. For the longest time, my joy, my sense of self joy, came from relationships. Um, Falling in love was regardless of how it felt to actually do it, like if I was in the 2 first months of it, whether or not it really lifted me that much, the sense that it lifted me was huge, huge. So talk about ambassadors of hope. And remember, for me, hope, all of those positive words, hope, optimism, um, uh, uh, romance, you got to put the terms "for me" at the end of them. All hope is self-hope. All romance is self-help romance. All optimism is self-optimism. It's optimism that things will turn out good by your standards. So ambassadors of hope ambassadors of romance. That would include people who come along and they feel like they're lodestars you can rely on because they do see you. You get addicted to feeling good about yourself in their presence. Now, there may be people who are less shallow than me about this stuff. I'm at least looking at this side of it, and I don't assume I'm in it alone. I was never religious, but I did that thing about partnership. When a partner approved of me, when I got what I called endorphment, the endorphin rush of being endorsed, it felt like being granted eternal life. And when a partner disapproved of me, it felt like I was being sentenced to death. I took it that seriously for a long time, and now I don't have that one anymore. They make you feel seen. They make you feel seen and approved of. And and so and the other thing that's interesting about it, if they make you feel seen and approved of, you're not going to discredit them. You will credit them because, after all, they've become a reliable source of something that makes you feel good. So draw a parallel here. I've done this before, but draw a parallel to the Trumpists. Um, a Trumpist goes to a rally. Someone Trump receptive goes to a rally and feels great about themselves. What happens to their powers of skepticism about Trump's message? Why would you want to be skeptical about a source of that kind of succor? You wouldn't want to. Now draw a parallel to falling in love. Someone attractive looks at me and laughs and thinks I'm good fun and really approves and lights up. And am I going to be skeptical at that moment about whether or not they're playing me? No, I'm not. And the hungrier I am for that kind of affirmation, the more I will be a sucker for it. The more I will say, no, they speak truth. Why? Because they're speaking truth that's affirming of me, and therefore they must be speaking truth. So skepticism goes out the window. The hungry are soon eaten. That's what I'm talking about here. Um, so let's see. Okay, all right, global. Here's my comment. Here's my comment. Hope, helping other people excel. I get what you're going at there, and I'm actually saying the opposite of that. I know what it's like to help other people excel and to feel good about it. Um, I'm actually challenging us. I mean, many would write me off as cynical for saying this, to notice that actually the hope I feel is the hope that I'm a decent person um, uh, for helping other people excel. That would be that it's the self-hope side of it. I'm not saying all hope is self-hope. Um, but I am saying we need to pay more attention to that side of it. First of all, I want to say there is nothing more hopeful about me than about the MAGA people. They're as hopeful as I am. They're maybe even more hopeful. So I do not consider hope a virtue. I consider it a human move. It's something that humans do, is that they hope. And I'm trying to understand where it's a good thing and where it's a bad thing. And I also have to recognize that since it's a bad thing too, there's nothing, I don't win against Trumpists by saying, well, I'm more hopeful than you. Um, and I have to face into the way that the hope is partly for me and their hope is partly for them. So that's just that's something that I would add to it. And some would be dismissive of what I just said. Like that's just pure cynicism, Jeremy. Like hope is helping other people excel. That's what hope is. Um, and I would say, okay, yeah, but keep in mind that if what I'm saying is true, we wouldn't want to admit it. I mean, all that stuff I just laid out of the inventory of where I'm getting my affirmation these days, that's not stuff people mostly talk about. You don't share where you're getting high on yourself, where you're maintaining your buoyancy, where you're keeping, while treading water, how you're keeping from sinking. We don't talk about that stuff. And understandably so. We need to not feel needy. And what I'm talking about here is no, actually, part of why I partnered wasn't just to help out my partner. Part of it was because I felt more hopeful about myself when I was helping out my partner. I had I lucked into some really attractive partners, and at one point I just had to realize I just had to laugh at myself. I felt so good for helping out my attractive partner, and I thought, yeah, if you were really altruistic, you'd be helping out the least among us. The image that came to me was like, oh, I'm such a superstar altruist by helping out this gorgeous babe. Um, that's like a toddler saying, I'm a superstar basketball player because I can shoot hoops in this play school hoop. That's what it came down to. I had to admit that to myself. So, um, anyway, in the end, it all comes down to hormone poisoning. I did have a girlfriend early on who coined the term hormonal certainty about what goes on in partnership. And yeah, there's that too. I do look back at it. I mean, it's such a strange optical illusion partnership is. It is so damn convincing. And yet when you step back, it is not convincing. So yeah, it's really strange. There were these studies where they would ask people questions under two circumstances, the same people. They would ask these people questions while they're masturbating to porn and while they're not. And the answers were radically different. It's like a whole other frame of mind when you're aroused, is what they were trying to get at. And it's okay. Jung, thank you for my work. Hope, the opium of the masses. It keeps it powerful and power. In in your opinion, I agree, Pietor. And my question also is, can we look at it as members of the masses and notice that we live on this opium, that we actually thrive on it? So you just gave me an idea for a term, which it's so obvious, I don't know why I haven't used it before. There's hopium, but I've also long used the term myopium, which is myopia. Um, myopia is short-sightedness. So what I'm talking about is the pain-killing effect of short-sightedness, which is another way of talking about compartmentalization. Now, you've done something else here at the end, um, Pietro, which relates to the origins of life work. So you've named three chemicals: cortisol, dopamine, adrenaline. And here's the question I pose to you based on that work I do on what selves and trying are, what we actually are. Um, at present, the way most biologists talk about this stuff, they equivocate. They say that cortisone provides an opiate. You say that these are pain-killing drugs. Okay. Well, there's no pain in the drug. And so what are you going to say? Well, you're going to say, well, the drug acts like a trigger. Now we're talking mechanism. So it acts like a trigger that drives an appetite or a feeling or a sensation. Okay, so where have we put that feeling now? It's not no longer in the chemical. The chemical doesn't have feelings. It's a chemical. Well, we say it triggers by entering a receptor, and then it's doing that inside of a body. So if I put some cortisol on the table's not going to get happy. So, okay, so I'm talking about a self. All right, so I could continue the equivocation by saying the cortisol enters a receptor, it's all strictly physical, mechanical, like you're describing a Rube Goldberg machine, and then there's a algorithm, or there's a black box here. It's an engine of happiness, and it generates happiness. That's one way I can handle it. Is to say that happiness is nothing but another mechanistic response. It's just a signal in the abstract. And the signal is, it's like if a computer had the word happiness fed into it. That doesn't quite work though. So we're not quite machines. So we have to explain, all right, how does cortisol end up making a self feel a certain way? And this is you probably know this one. It's referred to as the hard problem in cognitive science. Well, yeah, you could get molecules forms cause this form could cause that form could this form, to where you have where you have the signal, the word, the token, yellow or happy generated. But how does it actually become a feeling thing? They are produced in our bodies and can be triggered by telling stories. Watch the great YouTube about the alchemy. Yeah, no, okay, you've made a giant leap here. And so I'm not gonna move with you to the telling of stories, because I want to talk about the story we're telling in telling it this way. So those drugs are produced in our bodies. Okay, and they're triggered by telling stories. Just follow me for this far. All I'm doing is raising a question that fascinates me. I think I have some approaches to it. I want to see if I can get you interested in this question. I got this computer, and I feed into it a story, which is just a string of tokens, a bunch of letters, and um, uh, and then by feeding them in, I get these chemicals, and these chemicals are produced by the machine whenever you feed it a story. Okay, and then the chemicals, what they're an opium, which means that they give pleasure. I'm still asking what gets the pleasure, because a computer, you can feed stories into it. You could feed stories into it and have a machine that triggers chemicals. Where's the pleasure? Where's the pain? Where is that stuff? This is considered the hard problem, and I call it the made harder problem. Because if you start with the assumption that we are computers or just machines and have never explained what selves and trying are, yeah, you're going to have a hell of a time explaining how you'd ever get feelings out of that. And this is the problem in cognitive science. They're mostly diagramming us out like we're AI machines. But we're not. We're struggling for our own existence. We're dying all the time. We have to regenerate ourselves. So we're at stake for ourselves in a way that uh, machines are not. We have to keep regenerating ourselves. And we do that even if we're just plants. But we also do that as humans or as animals. We do that where we have two systems that are coupled. Our neuronal system that also has to feed itself, also is at risk of dying. That if neurons don't get metabolism, they die. And if they don't generate stuff out of metabolism, they die. That is, they're at risk. And they're a whole system within us, our somatic body, which is like a plant's body. And the two coupled is where I suspect emotion comes from. But all I'm trying to point out, Pietro, is that your story as you give it here um, does not account for where the experience is. You put it in stories, you put it in chemicals, and it doesn't get us to explaining the empathy that you're talking about at the end. You're doing what most researchers do, that you're describing this stuff, and yet you're describing it in a schematic form. Let me give you an example that ties this around to the issue of Trumpists. So I read lots of books. That's how I killed my hearing uh, about Trumpists, and some of them are written by psychologists. And I read one by a prominent psychologist, and someone who's gotten a lot of popularity for his books lately. I'm not saying he's prominent within academics, but he's certainly gotten more traction than most lately, in which he's trying to understand people who treat us like machines, like we're just machines, like we're just robots. And these are the psychopaths and the leaders who do that, the way Trump does. He's trying to understand us. But in the meantime, he is giving an account similar to yours here, where you got chemicals that are triggered by stories, that are triggered by, and then they generate emotions. And he never, ever explains where the self is or the trying is or all of that. He just kind of assumes a machine. He's giving you a mechanistic account of what we are. To explain human behavior and to explain the people who treat us like machines. So do you see the problem with this? You see the problem with this? Which is, if I gave you an account, let's say I did what you just did, Pietro. I did it with an account of how someone becomes a psychopath. And I'm saying, and I'm defining a psychopath as someone who treats you like an object, not like a human being. No empathy for you. They treat you like a machine. And I start to describe, well, the Trumpists are like this, and they have no, this is the machine that they are. I've got the problem of having accused someone of treating us like machines with an explanation for us that treats us like machines. Yeah, like philosophical zombies. So we're dealing with those kind of questions here, and on top of it, just one more layer is that I think Trumpists want to be treated like machines. It's what I call robo envy. I worry far less about AI than I do about people who want to become AI. That is, they'd like to be not feeling. They. This is what I mean by hero bot. They are robotically playing hero. They are acting like their feelings have nothing to do with it. My sense is that their feelings have driven them to this, that it feels far safer to be a machine, and that this is true across what humans have always wanted. The concept of being enlightened is the concept of being a machine. The concept of the philosopher king is like being a machine. The concept of reaching heaven is like being a machine. There's no more pain, no more doubt, no more of that kind of contrasty emotional at-riskness. We dream of reaching a plateau above it all, and then acting like a machine that can always make the right move and doesn't have to deal with any doubts. So the appetite, this robo-envy appetite, they see manifest not just in their behavior like they're the perfect robot, like the Trumpist is the perfect robot, but their direction to you. You should become what they are. Why aren't you? You're just a malfunctioning robot to them. And they want to whack you or eliminate you or get you to think like that they do. All of that is related to this problem with it. We have not figured out the difference between us and machines. And the closest we get to it is basically implying ghosts, like we got a soul, or like information has entered into matter and somehow made it. Yeah. So, Pietro, I'm saying there is nothing but physical mechanism. There's nothing but matter and form and the tendency for that to change over time. But if you say biomachines, you're saying something else. So, first of all, you're putting bio in front of it without explaining what you mean by that. And the other is that machines and mechanism are different, or machines and mechanics. Mechanics, in physics, mechanics just means pushes and pulls of different forms on each other, atoms in motion. But machine is something different. It's engineered or designed by someone, and I don't think we are. So the majority of people assume we are designed by someone, God, and I don't think we are. So I have to unpack that. And I don't get to just act like, yeah, I just have to do that. I have to unpack that, and I invite others in. Are the feelings a type of reaffirmation of the expected outcome based upon something instinctual? Thank you for this. It's a good question. It's a larger question. Um, it's an old question too. What one of Freud's big takeaway was that you've got this with humans. You've got a secondary system, or with animals, you've got a secondary system. Plants are just out in reality. They have their, you could say, instincts, and they survive or they die. But with feelings, you get this other realm, which is loosely correspondent to what is good or bad for you biologically. The fact that food tastes good, the fact that sex feels good, those are good for your biological reproductive success. Does that mean that all feelings are accurate reflections of what's good or bad for you physically or biologically? Your biological reproductive success? No, not at all. And this is something fundamental. I can end on a really sour note here. Feelings are a displacement from reality. There's living in the real world, and then there's having this kind of uh, capacity internally to respond, you could say, to a model of the real world. And then language on top of that is another displacement. So these are displacement moves. Um, One way I think about feelings is like uh, pilots flying by instrument. So a pilot could get a license, an instrument license, which means that in the dark or in the clouds or where there's no visibility at all, they know how to fly by instrument, just by tracking the gauges inside their cockpit. Feelings are sort of like that. Uh, it first hit me when a girlfriend said, "I want to make a difference. I want to feel like I made a difference." And I realized, oh, those are two different things. Um, I want to fly the right route, but the way I know whether I'm flying the right route is this instrument panel inside of me, my feelings. And the thing about feelings is that uh, they can become really miscalibrated to reality, and they're much cheaper than reality, dealing with reality. So I can be a legend in my own mind. I can give myself reassurance. I can give myself all sorts of confidence through feelings, reaffirmation, as you suggest, um, that actually is very displaced and detached from reality. I can become a legend in my own mind. I can get stuck on heroin. So this is a real challenge. Is that when you get a system like that, like feelings, it can get very miscalibrated, and it's much less effort than dealing with reality. And this is, I think, so. Now take this up another level to language. So now I have feelings plus language, and I can reinforce my feelings with reassuring language. Um, One of the philosophers of science, a guy named Karl Popper, made the argument that with language we can let our hypotheses die in our stead. He's right. There's a major advantage of having uh, language, therefore concepts. Is I can say, well, what about if I tried out heroin? Let me see what that'd be like. Oh, I'd probably die from it. Fuck it, I won't. That's letting your hypotheses die in your stead. And it only occurred to me last night. that he's not paying attention to the other effect of having language and therefore concepts, which is that we can let our hypotheses live at the peril of our long-term survival. It's because it's just a hypothesis. For example, thinking that I'll live forever or that I go to heaven or whatever. I can keep that thing alive. It's cheap. Doesn't cost me anything. Or that heroin will make me a hero, something. That taking heroin, I can do that stuff. I can do the things in my mind that are actually very bad for me. So what I'm suggesting here, and this is just really broad brush, is that feelings are a displacement from the reality dealing directly with reality. We're once removed by feelings, simplistically put, and then twice removed by language. So I think the most likely prognosis for humankind, this has to do with narratives, Pietor, um, is a dissociation death spiral. You probably heard me make this doomy prognosis before. It's that reality will get more and more complicated, and you have heard it before. Yeah, sorry for repeating myself. It goes without saying, bears repeating. And at the same time, thank you for even hearing me. I mean, that you would even know this, that you would even know these references I'm making is quite the honor. I have to think about this stuff, not everybody else does. Anyway, dissociation death spiral, reality gets complicated. Um, People go for simplistic, reassuring narratives, compartmentalizing and dissociating from reality, thereby neglecting reality, which thereby gets worse, causing us to get even further into our dissociation. So I don't see much hope that we'll get more realistic as the shit hits the fan. That's not been the human tendency. Um, some people do, but most people don't. They get terrified. They reach up with one hand to grab whatever reassuring narrative enables them or indulges them in reaching down with the other hand to grab whatever the fuck they feel they need. And I understand that. I do understand it. I said it disparagingly, but I understand it. In the meantime, the problem is this: people make life a whole lot harder than it has to be by pretending it's a whole lot simpler than it can be. And so, where does that leave us? Well, it leaves me coming back next Saturday, if I can, up from Mexico or Guatemala, and having this conversation again. I want to tell you again. I put my email address in there earlier. With two things to do with it. One is if you aren't a part of the study group, feel free to join. All that means is you'll get emails that says when we're meeting. We're meeting tomorrow morning at 9:30. This is the study group on how to engage with people there's no talking to. What do you do with someone who's been issued whatever wild card, trump card, deck of cards, branded to whatever? Um, and then, other than that, I continue to think it would be fun if we actually could talk where I wasn't just monologuing at you guys and you were texting. Anybody who would actually want to have more of a conversation, you wouldn't be obliged to show your face or to talk, but at least it would be more of an exchange. I feel a little uncomfortable monologuing this long. Not uncomfortable doing it. I could do this. I could do this. I could do this to fish. I'm so into talking. Um, and I'm really glad you're not fish. I'm really glad you're here and thinking with me. But we could think it up a notch together, more one-on-one, and it would feel fairer if you ever felt like it. So just email me if you're interested. I've only gotten one person so far. Jeff said he would be interested in doing that. And I will see you tomorrow, I hope, Jeff, at the meeting at 9:00. In the meantime, let's see. Still, I can't believe I missed you and Timothy Snyder a few weeks back. Vienna. Timothy Snyder, was he there? Um, yeah. Timothy Snyder, I met with one of the professors at the conference was from University of Toronto, where Timothy Snyder just went. Um, I'm really sorry I didn't make that connection, Pietro. And all right. Anyway, thank you all. I'll see you next time. All right. If you show up, I will. I will.